Woo! Hello there. It's it's the day after, and a little unshaven, a little bit creased around the edges. And but you know what though? It is raining outside again. Beautiful, beautiful. Mm. My inclination is always to have a shower and get shaved and all that. But you know what? I kind of like just being raw. It's the same way that I like to try and not script the thing out, but just come and be as real as I can be. Because even though this is just a surface, it's just a facade, it's just a talking head, I'm striving to bring as much authenticity as I can. And I find that the more work that I put into making a presentation, the more work I put into the surface and apparent cultivated surface, the less there is in the substance of it. For me, that's just what I'm talking about, right? So it was music last night, and it was an unusual one. There was some moments, but my friend, see, I play music with a couple of guys at the moment. One guy's the Silver Seal, and the other guy's the Velvet Monkey. Everyone's got a name. But we were all dream hunters in our own way. I'm talking about the dream hunting, right? When we play music together, it's all about the dream hunting. And I had a weird experience with the Velvet Monkey last night. And he likes to microdose the mushrooms these days. So he's been doing it a bunch, and it sort of gives him a boost and whatnot, right? And so I had one with him. I had a little cap to myself, so we shared an experience, and it took us into a strange zone. It was a strange zone, and I am a strong advocate for the psychedelic experience. I think it's something that psychedelic, hallucinogenic. I don't think these words respect what it really means. It is a spiritual envoy. It is something that helps break the continuity of that conditioning. And research it for yourself. Is already, psychedelics, have a high success rate, higher than any other pharmaceutical medication, in a higher success rate in treating like depression and PTSD, these kind of like fixed state mental illnesses. Anyway, research for yourself. It's real. It's happening. And I think actually Timothy Leary was more on target than it seemed at the time, when he said he thought that LSD should be part of our education system. Maybe not LSD, but ayahuasca, mushrooms, peyote, something of that nature. And perhaps not in our education system with people who are very young, but part of our education system for people in their 20s, to really make sense of what's happened to them, of what their education has created in them. I think that's something that our culture is going to explore, and it's going to be meaningful and true in the future. And actually, it's my hope, because those experiences have helped me. Those experiences have helped a lot of people, and is what our culture, our blighted, post-paradigm, Western, North American culture needs. But anyway, that's a kind of a deep moment there. I'm coming off of just talking about the Dream Temple yesterday, and I realized, wow, what do you say after that? But at the same time, whatever words, whatever comes out isn't an end. It's just another beginning, That's just the threshold. That's just how I look at life. That's how I feel about life, and I wanted to communicate it to you because I want to encourage you to think about it. Think about what that means, Consider what life might mean if you could see it from outside of the conditioned response, right? So anyway, last night we played some music, and we hit some peaks, but I found, and it's hard to talk about, but I don't know. I found that the Velvet Monkey wasn't listening very well last night, and I just, sometimes I think he gets fixed in ideas and thoughts, and it gets real hard to like get loose, because it's all about getting loose and outside of your mind, Like that great funk line, free your mind and your ass will follow. Well, by free the mind, that means to use another quote, lose your mind in order to come to your senses. You know, these two phrases for me sum up the process of what it means to break the conditioning, you know? Free your mind, free yourself from your mind, and your ass will follow. That means you start to enjoy the music and you start moving, right? You gotta go out of your mind in order to come to your senses, which is to say the embodied world around us is only accessible through our senses, not our mind, not our memory, not our analytical process. And until we come outside of the mind, we do not experience life fully. And so our music last night was characterized from my perspective of me trying to like pull at someone who was very stuck, which was a challenge. And I mean, at the same time, you know, ordinarily, you know, we smoke a lot of the pot while we're playing music, and we also had this little microdose, so things were a little bit crazy. You know what I mean? But what it got me meditating on was something that when I talk about the conditioned response, and I just referred to, you know, these different phrases about, you know, what it means to come out of your mind and be in your body and be in the world and be in your energy being, shall we say, because that's to me the ultimate reality, is a phrase, surface tension. You ever seen like a very close-up view of like a pond, you know, that smooth surface of the pond, and you see this little insect will come and land on the surface of the pond and will just sit there almost like on something pillowy, you know, like a little insect will just sit on the surface tension of the water because the insect is too light to go through, just sits on the surface of the water. That's the same reason why sometimes if you fall from great height or you do a big dive and you hit the water, it can be painful because slap, you're going right through the surface tension of the water. So the water is the substance and it's got a tension, and to plunge inside of it, you got to get past the surface tension of the water, you know. Stone has got a very much more intense surface tension, shall we say, than water. And yet rock is ultimately liquid as well, if you look at the world in geological time, you know, but that's another story. I'm talking about surface tension right now because I think that it is an analogy, and a very powerful analogy, for what it means to be in the moment and what it feels like when you cannot get into the moment. So I say surface tension. A little insect lands on the surface tension of the water and it can just sit there because it can't push through. It's too light to push through the surface tension of the water. I'm going to suggest to you as an analogy, that little insect is thinking. That little insect that sits on the surface of the water is thinking. Thinking never has the weight, the gravity, the strength, whatever you want to call it, to break through the surface tension into the living moment. And so that's another way in which I think that our society demeans and debases all of us by drawing us out of our depths, for drawing us out of our strength, for drawing us out of our positiveness, which is the source of strength and gravity inside of us, into this shallow, reactive, anxious, negative, condemning, critical nothing. It's just a nothing. It's a reactive static. That's this thing. You know what I mean? And that's the thing that can never enter the dream temple, if you will. When I was saying yesterday, dream temple is nothing more than living, loving, healing, evolving, dreaming, energy being loving, being in the moment, connecting with people, being alive to your living moment. The thing that's in the way is surface tension, and life itself has no surface tension. You know, I mean, if you watch animals and other living things, they're just doing their thing. That's why animals are so wary of us, because it's like they're already in the depths of the moment. We, however, because we've developed our consciousness, it's become like a screen between us and our living reality. And so, like, for every time I play music, a little ear every time, you know, I may sound like, you know, I know a thing or two, but the fact is, it is a constant daily struggle. Loving, healing, evolving, dreaming is not a state. It's not a fixed state. It is the work and the discipline to not be fixed and to be in a process, a liquid, fluid process, to be plunged through the surface tension into the reality of life, which is meaningful, which is poetic, which is beautiful. And that's one thing which people who have the psychedelic experience notice, is that the world acquires beauty. Why? Because the psychedelic is a drug that has separated you from that continuity, from that staticky, surface-dwelling nothingness. And for a moment, you're given a truer vision, which is to say, you get to perceive and apprehend the beautiful, you know? Like, for example, when I've been working with the mentally ill and addicted people, I hate those terms, but I'm just saying them just to keep the flow going here, right? Like I worked with one client in particular, like in the place where I worked. I worked there. I'm just off work right now, but I worked with the most challenging client in the place where I worked. Maybe 25, 30 people who lived there in different wards. And I was working with the most challenging client. And challenging because of the nature of the complexity of what's going on for her, right? But unfortunately for her, is that it's so unfair, the things that happened to her, all the traumas that damaged her and created the person that she is, where her very personality and being, it just tears people apart. She just tears people apart and burns them out. And after working with her for a year, I had to step back too, you know? Part of the reason why I'm not working at this exact moment. I am renewing and regaining my strength, because that was a hard year, right? But she'd tear people apart, you know, and there's a lot of burnout. And when I started working with her, I noticed that amongst my colleagues, no one had anything positive to say, because when you're dealing with someone with a lot of negative tendencies, right? And I mean, I might be speaking about someone who is very, very challenging in the mental health system. And yet we all know what these people are like, who just like, they're just so ingrained to traumatic response that they're looking to trigger you, to bring you into the familiar negative place. You know, you think about like arguing with someone who's got a lot of trauma history. It's like if they're getting angry or they're acting crazy, they're trying to suck you into the place which is familiar for them, you know? In other words, to draw you into their own surface tension, you know, if you follow the analogy that I'm saying. And so what I noticed is that very few of my colleagues were capable of seeing her in any other words than negative coping words, because she just burned them all out. You know what I mean? And so I remember I talking to one of my colleagues, and he was like, I can't believe the way you talk about her, you know? Like, I wish I could talk like you talk, right? And I was trying to, you know, explore that moment, right? But the deeper aspect is that he was stuck in the surface tension. You know, he couldn't see any beauty in her. Couldn't see any beauty in her, so there was no place where he could take hold of her in her best place and then try to anchor her there. You know, he got caught in her surface tension, and for her, surface tension is like issues of addiction and pressure and discomfort, just this endless negative thinking, which just is never at peace, you know? Being around her was being around someone who every several seconds a new disturbing thought would come. By disturbing, I mean a pressure impulse thought that would take her out of the living moment into that surface tension, crackling static, you know? I'm using this person, I'm describing her very vaguely because, you know, she is a client who I'm thankful for the privilege to be around, and I want to hold her. I want to hold her confidentiality in the strictest and most sacred confidence, and yet there's elements that are important to understand what I mean by when I talk about surface tension, Because in someone with severe and persistent mental illness with all sorts of complicating addiction issues, that surface tension is something that they can't even break through with incredibly high levels of care. I achieved it with her, you know. I'm a very devoted person in the field, and I got something special to give. And it's not so much that I got to give it. I am able to, through my discipline, not give into that surface tension and then allow her to more come into some other space, you know, where she can be okay. She can see the beauty a little bit and not just get caught up constantly, you know, thinking about the past, worrying about the future, just agitated, you know what I mean? And so, but it's something we all face. It's something we all face. It's a challenge, you know? The surface tension is something we all live inside of most of the time. And every time I come to music, which is where I was coming to with all this, I got all the detritus of the day-to-day inside of me until I start making those notes. And the notes are something which, even though I am making them, I don't know, it draws me into something different. It's a vibrational tone that draws me out of this thing. And even then, it sometimes takes maybe as much as 20 or 30 minutes to like draw me through the surface tension of my own mercurial buildup, you know, because it just happens, you know, and every time I go to music, I'm never sure, like, is it going to be good? Do I still have it? Is it going to be joyful? You know what I mean? And it's all about surface tension, plunging through the surface tension into the living moment, whatever that might be. And I'm using it as an analogy to give substance to what I'm describing. When I talk about the Dream Temple, I talk about healing journey and the barriers between that I faced. I could never break through the surface tension. I broke through many layers of surface tension, I should say, in my life, but I couldn't get through that final crust. There was like a bedrock that was in the center of me that I just could not get through on my own. I needed some kind of high impact to break me open. You know what I mean? And that did come, and I'm thankful for it. I'm so thankful to be here with you right now, freed of all that. And so now I'm an envoy from the deeper reality now. And I'm telling you about surface tension because even in myself, it's something I struggle with daily. It's a never-ending process. There is a discipline to it. However, it's a discipline which is, I don't know, conducive. It's its own momentum, creates its own momentum. It's a momentum of joy, which, when you realize it, takes the same amount of effort as the momentum of distress, because distress is a habitual reaction. And the working through it, the healing of it, is learning to penetrate the surface tension that's cultivated in our minds, that keep us pulled into an idea place, an empty, void of content and meaning place, where the only realities are mental illness, addiction, thoughts of suicide, despair, disconnection, critical, negative, empty, nothing. So last night, the Velvet Monkey, he felt very stuck in that place, you know? But like how it manifested was very, like, you know, he's got very interesting and unusual, eccentric ideas, you know? Other times I call him the Nutty Professor, you know, the mayor of Groovetown. I got all these names for him. I like to name people, especially in a creative zone. It just yields to metaphoric imagery, right? However, I found him very anchored in pseudo-informational ideas, you know? And so it was very difficult for me to feel us breaking through the surface tension. And that sounds blameful, like, I felt he wasn't listening. You know, obviously, you know, I mean, I am there as well, right? And we did break through. We had plenty of good moments. It's not like it wasn't a beautiful music moment. I just felt inside myself that there was a lot more effort than usual in order to get to the sweet spot. This is what I noticed, you know? Everyone has good days or bad days. I'm not attached to it, but it allowed me a meditation that I'm sharing with you now on surface tension, because it's another way to consider all the things that we go through in our North American society, where we are bombarded with shallow images that draw us out of our true beings and take us into this reactive place where we're constantly in a very shallow, surface, vaguely involved way, especially in the internet here, which is why I'm taking the time to be here with you, because I feel this time, perhaps more than any time in history, it is important for everyone to do their part. Because as I was saying yesterday, society is nothing more than the relationships that exist between individuals. And therefore, individual action is the only thing that has any meaning now. Because what can we do? The forces arrayed against us are too mighty. The forces of the state, the forces of the 1%, the forces of all the evil in the world. It's too much for any single person. And especially with the internet, you see, the internet taps us into every crisis across the globe. This nervous system makes us aware of anything we want to choose to focus on. And if you're not careful, things like Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and Reddit or whatever the hell it is, draws you into something where it is giving what it thinks you want, or what is being vended by businesses and companies and the powers that be. And you can spend your entire life just sucked up in the next referral, the next prompt, the next instigated thing, constantly just skipping like a little stone, skipping on the surface tension of the water without ever plunging into the sweet depths of your life. What's that going to look like? You know? For me, the things that I'm trying to describe to you here have been my salvation, which is to say the life that began when I finally was plunged through that last boundary of surface tension that was keeping me from who I am. And as my healing journey is proceeded, you know, I realized that I've got a gift that I can share, a gift I always knew I had, and yet my conditioning conspired to make me ashamed of the best part of myself, which is to say, the depth of my loving being. You know, it's something when I'm in the field, it's of measurable and objective value to the clients that I work with. And now that I've been off work for a little bit, I've been allowing it to come through me. And I realize as well that utilizing this tool, being on the internet, is another key piece. It's key because it's about vibrational level, you know? When I vibrate here with you, I continue into my own life, knowing that in the world that I live in, it's another day where I've done what I can do, you know? And when I'm back at work very soon, the mode is going to change. I'm going to continue to come here because this is an important part of my journey. And yet it's probably going to be more in the evening, you know, because I'll be after work time, right? But we will see. That is a threshold I'm going to cross very shortly, back to work, as it were, you know? But for now, surface tension has been my contemplation for today. Breaking through the surface tension. How to do it, you know? That therein is the greatest challenge for people, because it's as unique as there are people, you know? With the severe and persistent mental illness, you know, dealing with people who are in deep crisis, what I can say is that it begins in just feeling good, you know? Take a breath and just be still. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but it's as simple as that, you know? I find that when I get around people who are just in this, crazy momentum, which is to say, trauma-induced breakage and dislocation from the moment, and then it becomes as florid or desolate as that person's mental process, you know, based on this historic trauma, and they're just on the run inside somewhere that's not in the world that we're sharing here, you know. First of all, it's just, I don't know, being interested, being curious, being present, being aware of the beauty of the world. How do you get there? How do you get to this place that's on the other side of the surface tension? The surface tension, which is just an illusion anyway, you know? Animals don't live in surface tension. The natural world has no surface tension in it. It's we people, because of this evolutionary thing we've been given, our minds and our consciousness, somehow it's a screen between us and the world. It's very strange. It's like our very concept of time, which is in our minds, our very concept of like history, our understanding of history, and our capacity to conceive our end, which again, remember, love, light, and life, dying, we need both of them, right? Like, it's our ability to conceive time, our beginning and our end. Suddenly we're aware of that, and it's like popped us out of being in the moment, you know? They always talk about, you know, the fall from grace, the ejection from the Garden of Eden. You know, in most creation myths, there's something which made people lose some kind of Eden, heaven feeling, you know? And I guess what I'm saying is I'm summing that up in a picture when I talk about that little tiny frail insect landing on that smooth surface of the pond. Just sits there on top. That surface tension is literally the gateway to paradise. Don't be an insect. Don't be in your insect mind where you're too light, too lacking of depth and meaning, critical, reactive, you know, caught up in this static, you know? There's so much static in the world. Static is just surface tension, you know? The internet is surface tension. You know, the TV is surface tension, right? Sometimes there's something of meaning which will draw you into the moment. You know, there are definitely people doing it, you know? Think of how I started this whole thing, talking about Joe Rogan and Sadhguru. God, I love those guys. You know, every time I hear them, even Joe, you know, I mean, my God, thank God for Joe, because he's so authentic. And it's the authenticity. Authenticity is the world that lies on the other side of the surface tension. And usually the people who got issues with him are people who cannot get past surface tension. What are they doing in their own lives? Very little, but they, you know, it just becomes this static. What are you doing? What's the positive substance? You know, like what he's saying, what are you doing? What's your substance, right? And inevitably all you got is like an endless Instagram feed or a Facebook feed or whatever, with just endless manufactured images of an idealized life that's got no substance or depth, you know? And the more you get caught up in it, the more you abstract into this perfected idealism, the less and less you're able to break through the surface tension into your own life. You know, it's like I was saying yesterday in my little metaphor, right? Even in my own life, loving, healing, evolving, dreaming, if I were to get too absorbed in this without remembering the dark reality that death is the world in which we hover, you know, it's the mystery, because death is the end of all things material. It seems to be a threshold which even our energy is a challenge for us to conceive. We can't conceive of it. And without it, nothing makes any sense. This is the beauty and the delight and the joy, and yet without this, it's nothing but surface tension, you know? You need the depth. You need to be able to see things in depth in order to have any meaning in your life. It can't just be a confection of your mind. It can't just be a confection of your idealism, you know? So much of what people say and do in this world is just like cotton candy. It's just this sweet, flossy nothingness that might be pleasant on a summer day at the fair, but afterwards your stomach is sore, you're not even hungry for dinner, and what did you really get at the end of the day? You know, it was just a momentary nothing, you know? So how to break through the surface tension? mean, that's the essential issue with every therapeutic relationship in the field. How do you help someone break through the surface tension of their own mental breakdown, their own crisis of addiction, right? It's just an inability to be in the living moment. That is the abundant and ever-present depths, heights, intensities of a living being that's waiting to be in your embrace and to embrace you in every moment of your life. And yet, most people are just stuck up here in the surface tension. I'm always using my right hand because for some reason, right and left, well, it comes from the Castaneda system, is to say that the energy on the right side of your body is very tonal orientated, right? And the energy of the left side of your body is very nawal orientated. And so in the knowledge that I have learned, and it's true for me. Maybe it's true just because I learned that particular way of looking at things, and therefore my life transpired in that direction. I don't think it's any coincidence that the left part of my body is I'm right side dominant, and so the left side of my body was always very much more poorly coordinated, and it's where all the tension lives in my body, is on the left side, trying to clench, wince, recoil, trying to just resist feeling and being authentic. In other words, trying not to be in the depths, because people brutalized to me when I was very young about the depths that I brought, the depths of my loving being. You know what I mean? No one ever helped me get a hold of it. They just crushed me into trying to be only in this kind of like tonal, is like, the day-to-day analytic mind. Just crush me into this tiny little pod, which is what gives me so much empathy for clients in the field, because my life was blighted by this and I could not break out of it. I needed help, and help I got. And all I can do now is return the favor and give what I can give to help others. And that's what this is, By helping you, I am proceeding along my evolutionary journey. And today, I'm focusing on the surface tension, because surface tension in a metaphoric picture is the essence of what keeps us in the shallow, analytic mind place, the mind place full of ideas which are not real. I mean, yes, they're real, and our ideation is the place of evolution, right? But the problem is that we've been taken away from too much of the rest of our being in order to focus only on this little pod here, because by manipulating people into this little tiny idea world of only mind, memory-based, only mind, everything is material, everything is reduced to commercialism, everything is commodified, like it's only that way that people can be enslaved, that people can believe that they're divided rather than know that they're connected. See what I did there? Believe versus knowing, right? Knowing is something that comes from within. Believing is just a mental process where you're like, oh, I like that idea, I'll just attach to that. Beliefs are changeable. Beliefs are nothing. Beliefs are part of the blight, because we all have our beliefs. Someone goes against our beliefs, criticize, your beliefs are not my beliefs, blah, 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 blah. And so the illusion of dissonance, or the illusion of difference, creates dissonance, and we remain divided, and we remain enslaved, which is only to say we remain like that insect suspended on the surface tension of the pond, unable to break through, plunge deep into true being, which is connectedness, inclusive, whole, total, intense, meaningful, but also perhaps a bit scary, right? You got to come to grips with that fear. Fear is also a surface tension. In fact, I think that may be one of the strongest fibers of that surface tension is fear. What's anxiety? But fear of the future. People who've got anxiety can never be relaxed, because they're always afraid of what's going to happen. And so they can't be here now because they're afraid of what might happen later, right? But yet, whether it's later, whether it's something in the past, trauma is at root, and fear of it is the disconnecting element. And you've heard them talk about dislocation and disconnection, all those things. Well, I'm talking to you today in terms of surface tension to suggest the breakthrough. Got to break on through to the other side, as the poet's saying, right? Break on through to the other side. Of course, the other side is still right here, but that's the reality of threshold. It's awareness. Breaking on through to the other side means the other side of the surface tension. You're still in the same living moment. Nothing really changes. It's that you change and the world changes with you. You know, as another poet saying, change your heart and look around you. Change your heart, it will astound you. Changing your heart in my little moment today is the process of plunging through the surface tension into the depths of reality. And by the way, I was referring to the Doors there, Jim Morrison, when I talk about breaking through to the other side. And I was talking about Beck, Everybody's Got to Learn Sometime. I want to talk about changing your mind, looking around you, because it will astound you. Remember these songs. Listen to these songs. See what you feel about it. Because again, going back to my music experience last night, I find that the Velvet Monkey, he gets really, really interested in ideas. He's a real idea person. And sometimes there's so many ideas, so many thoughts going around, and I think he loses the ability to really hear and be in the moment. You know what I mean? And he's got a lot of his own problems. And I think that those are all to do with the surface tension of a particular way. So, don't be enslaved into the nonsense static that keeps you like a little insect sitting on the surface tension of the pond. Find the way to get into your love and reality and plunge through that surface tension, you know? In another way, when I talk about reaching is like pushing right through the surface tension. Take a hold of this world, you know, in a love embrace. There's Steppenwolf for you. Take hold of the world of love in the love embrace. That is breaking through the surface tension. You know, when you reach, you will be reached. So, on that note, be well and keep reaching.